Hi, Zircon, are you here? Welcome to episode 63 of Van Gogh Letters. We are going to start off with a final letter in September 1888 and then go into October. And I want to show you this graphic. Hi, Sharon, good to see you. This graphic basically shows you all of those 900 letters. In every dot represents a letter, and you can see kind of at a glance that what's the word the most letters in a particular month were written in October. You can see that that's when the most letters were actually written. There were a lot in July, August, September of 1888, but by far the most, not by far the most compared to that period, but by far the most, if you look at the average month, is this month of October 1888. So what happened during that month? Like what went down? I must say, when I look at this graphic, it's hard to think that it's 900. Doesn't look like it's 900 to me. But anyway, so it does make one wonder, have they left some of the letters out that he wrote to other people? I suppose one could take an afternoon off and count all of them. But, in terms of this particular month, October 1888, you can see it's the busiest month of this entire correspondence period. So what happened? What happened in October 1888? And that's what we're gonna find out. So let's go right there to the last day of September, and there he's written a letter to Emile Bernard, who's sort of it's almost like the guys in Hangover, the Hangover movie. They sort of, although they're artists, they sort of a group of guys who like hanging out, and that's Emile Bernard, Paul Gauguin, and Van Gogh, right? And I'm not using that reference lightly to the Hangover, because Van Gogh is going to wake up after some night of revelry minus his ear. It literally is going to be a lot like the Hangover. I think in the Hangover, someone ends up with a tattoo or a lost tooth. It's similar in a sense. Snowline, good to see you here. Chelsea, Terry Dean, good to see you guys here at such short notice. If you guys, hello, have you guys, what, you want to lie back? You want to lie back? Hey, you want to lie back and be comfortable? Am I right? Let's do that. Okay, come. My master, I'm not very comfortable sitting on your lap. I need to lie on your lap. So before we get to that, have you guys seen this picture? This is the frame I ultimately used in the frame and the surrounding material for those posters that I ordered, and as you can see, it came off quite well. Some of you said black frame, some of you said all black, whatever, but this is in the end what I went for. And then here's another view of it. Shall I put that up like this? There's just another view of it. You can see it's quite bright, quite vibrant. There's the other one. Okay, so I must say I'm pretty happy about it. When I look at it, I feel quite, I have pretty happy memories. It makes me think of America, so that's pretty cool. By the way, happy 4th of July to you guys. I know it's early, but happy happy 4th of July for me. It's tomorrow. For you guys, it's 2 days from now. By the way, I was actually, my original plan was that I would be leaving America about 4 or 5 days from now. So I actually returned from America a month early. I thought I would. My original flight was booked for something like the 5th of July or something like that, the 5th or 6th of July. And so it would have been, so yeah. And why did I change that? It was a couple of different things. I thought I would be traveling with someone in an additional period of time to Jackson Hole. I thought I would be. I also the South African currency depreciated, and it got really expensive. There was also supposed to be a trial, two trials. I think the one was supposed to be the Caitlin Armstrong case, got postponed to October, and the Brian Koberger case, well, I think it was just supposed to be a preliminary hearing, but that then also, I'm not sure if it got postponed or, but anyway. And so for those reasons and more, I just decided to come back home earlier. Another reason was summer was sort of catching up with me, and so I'd go to an airport and it would just be full of people, and the roads were getting busier, and I just don't really like to travel through traffic jams and queues. So there were also a couple of other things. While I was away, someone came into my home and stole a laptop. So there were kind of a few things that were sort of agitating against staying longer. I also felt after 2 months that 2 months was enough. I mean, I could have stayed another month. It wasn't that I wasn't enjoying it, but I sort of felt like, well, I feel like I kind of need to get back to work. And if I could have gotten back to work in America, then that really would have worked as well. Canada Day long weekend, that's interesting. Snowline says, I love the white because it doesn't compete with the photos. That is what I thought. I thought, let's use what's already there, for its own benefit. Okay, so let's go into the first letter. Hi, Alina, good to see you here. Okay, so again, we want to ask the question, what is going on? When does this whole downhill process start for Van Gogh? Is it his fault? Is it Gauguin's fault? What really happened? Let's try and not read the tea leaves. Let's actually read about what literally happened. By the way, the background behind me, what you see behind me is a photo that I took from the Colosseum in Arles in probably May 2019. Just trying to think. Yeah, about mid-May 2019. And if you look around about where the peach is on your screen, that's actually where Van Gogh was sort of living at the time. Just trying to orientate myself a little. Just trying to see that it's not the forest that's right directly above my head. Yeah, I think there's you can see trees slightly to the right. They're kind of smaller. That is where the yellow house sort of is. It's in that sort of area. And then you can see right beside that is the River Rhone. And that river, that curve in the river is the setting. So he literally stepped out of his home, went into a little park and painted stars over the Rhone. Well, that is where he did it. Sounds good, Helena. Okay. Do you guys know which picture I'm talking about? Let me see if I can bring it up. Starry night over the Rhone. It's this one. Let's do that. Right, so that's the picture we're talking about. Okay. Right, so let's go get into the final letter from September. And bear in mind, when he talks to Bernard, it sort of doesn't say the sort of things that he would say to his own brother. It's a little bit more crass and bro and bra, kind of thing. It's a little bit more informal. So he says, "My dear comrade Bernard, just a word to thank you for your drawings. I think they were done a little too hastily, and I like the drawings of the uh-huh." That's why I say he uses a bit of a um, language that he wouldn't really with his own brother. But for the rest, there's an idea in all of them. I've been overwhelmed with work lately, for the weather is glorious, and I must make the most of the fine days which are short. So just that sentiment, I want to make the most of the good weather. You get the idea that he's in good spirits, that he's motivated, that things are going well. I cannot withdraw what I said about the price, 3 francs just for food and then the extras. But I have no doubt that all that Gauguin told you about the prices here is correct. But all that I can see is that the moment of your departure to do your military service is drawing near, and I very much wish to induce your father to provide you with what's necessary to fortify yourself with good food without your work suffering under it. Let him do the handsome thing and give you all that is reasonable in the interval between now and the time of your service. I've written you insistently and repeatedly that if you go to Africa, you will work there and you will see the very scenery which you ought to see to develop your talent as a painter and a colorist to its full extent. But this can only be done at the expense of your poor carcass, unless before your African hardships, your father enables you to avoid getting anemic or catching a debilitating dysentery as a result of a lack of strengthening food. It is hardly possible to fortify one's body over there. Far be it for me to say that when one is going into a hot climate, one ought to fatten oneself up first. But what I do say is that one should attend to one's nourishment sometime in advance. And I abide by this through thick and thin, as this regimen agrees with me so well here, because there is some difference between the heat of Africa and the heat of all. You will either, and this is where I got the title for this episode. He's giving this advice to um, Bernard in a, like from the perspective of he's about to go somewhere else, right? And he says, you will either come out of this trial much stronger, strong enough for a whole artistic career, or a broken man. And the same, in a way, applies to Van Gogh himself. These words are quite haunting. He's either going to come out of this trial, right, losing his ear, going into an asylum, right, strong enough for a whole artistic career, or a broken man. And I think that is a really good question, maybe one worth putting up a poll for. What do you guys think is the answer? Does he come out of it a broken man? Because I mean, I think if you want to make the case that he is suicidal, then aren't you literally saying that he came out of the whole ear incident and the asylum a broken man, and that is why, or isn't that why he took his own life, right? So I think I'm going to put that up as a poll if Timmy can allow me to use both hands. Let's see if I can just put it in here. Not quite sure why I'm getting a. So I'm gonna in the poll I'm gonna ask, does Van Gogh come out of this? Okay, Timmy, I'm gonna put you down. But type with one hand, it's gonna take a little bit longer. So does Van Gogh emerge from his trial That's the ear incident and the asylum. Okay, so before I put the poll up, let's just review the question. It's this idea that certainly, do you guys agree that right now is not a broken man? That right now is physically is in fairly good health. Psychologically, he's happier than he's been for a long time. I think he's really invigorated by having his own place and investing himself in terms of the decor. He decides what color it's going to be, how to furnish it. His brother's been giving him a lot of money, right? And so he certainly is right now in a very strong position, one of the strongest positions I think we've ever seen him, right? So September 1888, Van Gogh is in a really good spot. His art is doing well. He's doing well. The only thing he kind of lacks, I guess, is a girlfriend and maybe even a good male friend. So maybe just lacks um, friends. He has acquaintances around him, and he does have a couple of friends in Millier and Bach, maybe to some extent. But he needs kind of someone who is going to be a lot closer. So more of an intimate friendship. So maybe just a stronger friendship with a male, and maybe his age, because Millier was a bit younger and also a soldier, and then maybe a kind of invigorating relationship with perhaps a woman who would stick by him, something like that. Otherwise, his life's not perfect, but it's going really well. And so the question is, he's about to go through a trial. He's going to lose his ear. He's going to be kicked out of all. He's going to go to an asylum. He's going to be extremely lonely, extremely isolated, extremely broken. But then does he emerge from that still broken, or does he emerge from that? Does he fix himself? Does he does he come out of that and he's still mad? Does he come out of that and he's still sick or not? So that's the poll. I think it's an interesting question. I also think it's an interesting question in relative to the mythology around Van Gogh as it is today. July 2023. How does the mainstream, how do art experts, what is the official version of his life story? And then think about that poll and whether that poll corroborates that or challenges that, right? Helena says, I would say medical health issues definitely does break you down. It's interesting. It's an interesting point. I'm actually thinking more about the psychological aspect, but I guess you could also say that medical or health issues can also challenge your psychology. But then I would say, if you're sick, if you struggling with your health, doesn't that mean you're going to struggle with your art? I mean, I can tell you right now, I'm struggling with serious backache, like really bad backache, and it's affecting my work. I really, it's one of the reasons why this Van Gogh episode is so late. I was like, geez, I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it because of a physical thing, right? It affects your motivation. It affects all of that kind of thing. Did it affect him? Did it like? Yes, it affected him. I mean, when you look at that graphic I showed you, you can see that he writes a lot fewer letters. His art output decreases, but then it increases again. So was he ultimately broken? If you look at the last letters he wrote in his life and the final paintings he painted, it's almost like you can almost get a sense of his output of letters matches his output of art and vice versa. And you can imagine why that would be the case. He needs to write letters to say that he needs more paints or whatever. He also needs to write more letters to say, I've done this. So it kind of makes sense that for every artwork, there's going to be a letter. For every letter, there's going to be an artwork, right? Does that make sense? Zircon says, didn't he paint more afterwards? Okay, Timmy, you can return. Okay. Comfortable. Okay, let's go back to the letter. Right. So he says, however that may be, I should be enormously delighted if you came here and if Gauguin came too. And then the only thing to be regretted will be that it is winter and not the season of fine weather. I'm coming to believe more and more that the cuisine is something to do with our ability to think and to make pictures. As for me, when my stomach bothers me, it is not conducive to the success of my work. And there you have him weighing in on this whole question that um, the big thing that is a problem for him when he works is his stomach. He kind of says that I don't know if he necessarily has stomach ache, but he basically has trouble with his digestion, I guess. And he says that is what disturbs his work. It doesn't really say anything else. He doesn't say that he has headaches or he has visions or he has paranoia. He says his stomach bothers him. And I think one of the reasons his stomach bothers him is because he um, he doesn't eat. He drinks alcohol sometimes to excess. He doesn't really eat very healthily in the first place. He spends his money on paint and canvas and not so much on food, right? But there he says it himself. When his stomach bothers him, that can interfere with his ability to work. He's not saying sometimes when I'm sad I can't paint, or sometimes when I feel lonely I can't paint, or um, I saw a pretty girl and I'm just so frustrated I can't paint. He doesn't say that. Anyway, it says, in short, I think that if your father made up his mind quietly to preserve your pictures and grant you a somewhat generous credit, he would lose less in the end than if he acted differently. In the South, one's senses get keener, one's hand becomes more agile, one's eye more alert, one's brain clearer, however, on condition. And so here again is some very important insight that he's giving us about himself. He's saying, you know what, in the South, my brain is clearer. It's not that he's getting madder, he's getting more sane. Whatever his psychological condition was in Paris or in Antwerp or in Amsterdam, if anything, is more sane and sensible in all. But he says on condition, and he says the condition is that all this is not spoiled by dysentery or something else of a debilitating nature. But again, he doesn't seem to be saying anything psychological. He's saying, your senses get keener as long as you're healthy, right? As long as you don't have stomach pain or whatever, or dysentery, right? He doesn't say, well, as long as I'm in a good mood. He says, apart from that, I venture to believe most firmly that anyone who loves artistic work will find his productive faculties develop in the South. But take care of your blood and take care of everything else. And now you will tell me perhaps that I'm boring you with all this, that you want to go to the brothel without giving a damn about all the rest. Now, can you see how Van Gogh thinks about Bernard, for example? He thinks of him as a pal to visit a brothel with, right? And what word does he use right out of the gate in his letter? So that is very much the area which Van Gogh kind of has in common with Bernard, for example, is that they kind of go out on the town and have fun of a particular kind, right? And that is the fun that he has with Bernard, and that is the fun that he has with Gauguin, right? But he's not having that fun right now. Why? Because he's working, and he says it. He says it himself. He says, um, "I've been overwhelmed with work." So that's another thing. When he's working, when his output is high in terms of his art, and I guess his letters, then he's not um, going to brothels, right? When he is going to brothels and he's not working very hard, that's when things go start falling apart. He says, "Good heavens, it all depends, but I cannot speak differently than I do. Art is long and life is short, and we must be patient while trying to sell our lives dearly. How I wish I were your age and could go off knowing what I know to do my military service in Africa, but then I should get myself a better body than I have now, and no mistake." Bear in mind at this point, he very likely is still does have syphilis, but it's sort of receded. It's kind of in remission. And it's in remission because he's not doing the sort of things that would lead to it coming back. He's not going to brothels, he's not drinking, he's not sleeping with prostitutes. He's because he's avoiding that, he's kind of okay. He's doing quite well, right? He says, if Gauguin and I are here together, which will probably happen, then we shall certainly do our utmost to save you expense. But then your father, on his part, ought to do his utmost too, and have confidence in us and realize that we are not trying to do him out of more money than necessary. To do good work, one must, here you go. To do good work, one must eat well, is he? Be well housed, is he? Well, I think that's starting to happen. Have one's fling from time to time. What do you think he means by that? And I think that is where whoever translated that was quite kind to Van Gogh, because I don't think fling is the word he actually used. I think you can imagine which word they did use. Smoke one's pipe and drink one's coffee in peace. The only part out of this that I think is relevant to what we're talking about is, so he's saying to do good work, you need to do all of these things. What thing do you think was not going to be present um, in the next couple of weeks? Out of all those things, what do you think was not going to be present? See what you guys say. Let's see if you can think critically here. If we go into the near future, he's saying to do good work, you need to eat well, be well housed, have a fling, smoke your pipe, and drink your coffee in peace. Out of those, which one do you think is going to be absent? What do you guys say? Let's have a look. Zircon says he's not going to be eating. Chelsea says fling. Sharon says food. And I agree with Lorraine. What's going to be missing in the near future and even into 1889 and even into the beginning of 1890 is that he's not going to have any peace. He's going to, I mean, how peaceful is it to be thrown? If you look at the picture behind me, the people who lived in those houses and villas and buildings, they decided in December and January 1888 and January 1889 that they don't want this rabble-rouser in their midst. They don't want this troublemaker living in their town, so they kicked him out. Does that mean you can drink your coffee in peace? When Gauguin was living with Van Gogh, do you think he could drink his coffee in peace? Do you think Gauguin could drink his coffee in peace, for that matter? When he was in the asylum, do you think he could drink his coffee in peace with people screaming and lamenting day and night, right? So so that would be the thing that would be affecting him, is that he couldn't work in peace, right? And the irony is that people say Van Gogh was mad when, if you were in that situation, right? If you just had to take any person, me, you, anyone, and say, okay, let's just forget about the circumstances, right? What we're going to do is we're going to cut your ear off, or you can cut your ear off, whichever. We're going to put you in an asylum, and now let's see how well you cope with that. Anybody would struggle. Even the most resilient psychology would struggle in that situation. And I would say that Van Gogh does pretty well under the circumstances, better than a lot of people. And the irony then is that he's then said to have gone mad and be insane and depressed. I think it's the opposite. It's an incredible story that he was so resilient and hopeful and optimistic and persevered. And that's why he's part of the Team Peachtree narrative, right? Mel Stiller, sorry, you've got to leave. Sorry that you must go. Do you guys follow my reasoning? Can you see why that makes sense? Okay. I do not say that all the other things are without value. I want to leave everybody free to do what he likes. But what I do say is that this system seems preferable to me to a good many others. A hearty handshake. Sincerely yours, Vincent. Okay, now we go into October. And so now he writes a letter to Eugene Bach. My dear friend Bach, many thanks for your letter, which pleased me very much. By the way, do you think he's going to refer to WHORES in this letter? Do you think Bach is the kind of guy he can do that sort of thing with as well? Well, let's find out from this letter. It says, I congratulate you on not having hesitated this time on having attacked the Borinage. What does he mean by attack? Did he go into the Borinage with an army? Did he sort of get some weapons and has he now gone with a Dutch regiment and attacked the Borinage? No, it's his way of describing when you take on, in an artistic sense, a particular subject. And so that's what he means by that. Okay, it says, there you have a field where you will be able to work all your life, the extraordinary scenery as the figure, as well as the figure. The tip girls in their pit rags especially are superb. So maybe he does have a certain life or experience in common with this poet. He says, if you should ever go to Petit Vasmes, please inquire whether Jean-Baptiste Denis, farmer, and Joseph Quinet, miner, are still living there. And tell them from me that I've never forgotten the Borinage and that I should still be delighted to see it again. Now I must tell you a piece of news, namely that I've furnished the house at last, and that I've immediately furnished a bedroom for Gauguin else who should come. So at this point, this late point, it's the 1st of October, was it the 2nd? The 2nd of October, he's already not even got his mind set on Gauguin arriving. So he's not hung up on Gauguin. I'd like Gauguin to arrive. I'd like Bernard to arrive. I'd kind of like someone to arrive. But he's certainly not fixated on Gauguin, right? The house is a lot brighter now than it was now that it is furnished. And I can tell you, um, this gave me a lot of excitement putting together, right? It is exciting. I don't know if you can think back to when you moved into your first home or had any home that was really your own. Um, when you make it your own, when you decide, I want this color and I want that over there, it gives you a kind of a sense of agency. It kind of gives you a sense of you are putting yourself, you're expressing yourself in the real world. You are manifesting yourself in the space around you, in the walls and the space around you, with the sort of patterns and emblems and representations that reflect you. And so in a way you are leaving a mark on the physical environment around you. And it can actually sometimes feel quite exciting, quite invigorating, quite pleasing to have an idea in your head, and then the next thing, there it is on a wall, or somewhere around you, in the space around you. You feel like that's me, and it's good, and I like it, right? And that's exactly the feeling he's getting. But it's not like he bought posters at the Grand Canyon, flew back to another country, and did this. He literally went out and painted these pictures himself, painted the walls himself, right? It's far more of a labor of love for him, but you can see why it's bringing him a sense of newfound agency and excitement and satisfaction, right? Okay, sorry, let's go back to that. So he says, um, after that, I've worked like blazes, for the fall is without wind and superb. And I'm also working on 7 square size study canvases. In the first place, the night cafe, where I've stayed with lamplight effect painted in the nighttime. 3 views of the public garden in front of the house. And then he talks about, so this is an edit. In the letter is a sketch of a lost painting, Poet's Garden 2. Wonder where that is. I don't, is it the Poet's Garden 1? Where's Poet's Garden 2? I don't quite see it. Anyway. Oh, there it is. Okay. Poet's Garden. It doesn't look like history has missed out that much in the sketch getting lost. Then he says, this is one of the views, a round clipped cypress or cedar shrub of a bottle green on a yellow-green lawn. In the background, a row of oleanders and 2 figures, a sky of raw cobalt. You see it, you see it is even a lot simpler than formerly, and then that painting's been lost. Talks about more of his art, then plowed fields, a scenery with nothing but lumps of earth, the furrows the color of an old wooden shoe under a forget-me-not blue sky with white cloud flocks. I must say, he is such a, when he wants to be, he's such a good writer. I mean, just think about how it says that. A scenery with nothing but lumps of earth, the furrows the color of an old wooden shoe, under a forget-me-not blue sky with white-tailed flocks. I mean, if he didn't paint that painting, you'd actually have a better idea of what he's talking about. Further, a view of my house and its surroundings in a sulphur sun, the sky hard and bright cobalt. A difficult job, I tell you. So that's not quite the one that, that's not the yellow house. I think that's an error. Then a view of the cafe on Forum Square where we used to go, painted by night. And lastly, a study of the Rhone, of the town lighted with gas reflected in the blue river. That one. Over it, the starry sky with a great bear, a sparkling of pink and green on the cobalt blue field of the night sky, whereas the lights of the town and its ruthless reflections are red, gold, and bronze green. The garden with the oleanders and the round clipped shrub as an impasto like painted porcelain. Remember the references he's made to stars. Yeah, he refers to it as sparkling. He's also said spangling. He's also used other words. Okay. The garden with the oleanders. Okay. Your portrait is in my bedroom along with that of Méliès and Méliès the Zauve. And so obviously these are kind of his closest friends. And it's quite interesting that Gauguin, well, I don't know if he had a chance to do Gauguin's portrait, but these are actually Van Gogh's friends, these two male figures, Eugene Bach and Méliès. And does he ever put Gauguin in his bedroom? I mean, bear in mind he painted his bedroom another 2 times, I think. And then he put other people's faces in the space where those portraits were. Does he ever put Gauguin there above his bed, like, Gauguin's such a cool guy, it was so nice living with him? And then why not? If Gauguin was such a good friend, if he was such a nice guy, why didn't he do that? Can you see that? He has a genuine friendship with Eugene Bach, and so he puts his portrait above his bed. He has a genuine friendship and fondness for Méliès, and so he puts a portrait of him above his bed. But as I say, he then later substitutes those portraits in subsequent um, iterations of the bedroom, and he doesn't ever put Gauguin above his bed. Can you see that? Doesn't that say something? Do you agree that that does say something? He says, I should like to ask you to exchange one of your studies of the coal mines for something of mine, but stop. I myself am going to send you a study first, when I'm sure it is one you will seem wholly unknown, when I'm sure it is one which will seem wholly unknown to you. For if you saw the night studies, you might like them better than the sunlight studies. Well, leave it to me, for I hope that our intercourse, once started, will last forever. Everything you'll do will interest me extraordinarily, because I love that dismal country of the Borinage, which will always remain unforgettable to me so much. And bear in mind, when Van Gogh was in the Borinage, um, it was like industrialization. It was basically he was going into an area where they were mining coal. It was like coal mines, right? And there were trains and soot and piles of black coal and dirt and fires and poor people, impoverished people who were suffering and dying, right? And he's saying, I love that dismal country. And it's only if you understand this part of Van Gogh that you really understand who he was, right? It's only if you understand, I can't say it in any other way. We tend to think that somebody else is basically like us, but they're not. And Van Gogh isn't like us. So if you went to the Borinage, you'd be like, get me the hell out of here. It's dirty, it's dreary, um, it's depressing. And he loved it, right? And even from um, I'm thinking like five thoughts at the same time. Even from from the south of France, even from that sunny place, even from that vibrance and brilliance, he thinks fondly, remembers. It's not like he goes, you know what, I've decided I really like brightness and sun, and actually I don't like where I've come from. He says, I still remember that fondly. I love it. I love that dismal country. So that strange sense of Zola's Pilgrim he's still feeling very strongly. He's just in a different setting, right? The Borinage is in Belgium, the coal mines of the Borinage. He says, I have nearly made up my mind when I go to Paris next year to push on as far as Mons and perhaps even as far as my native country. So before I lose my train of thought, so before I did Van Gogh letters, I watched a couple of documentaries. I read quite a few articles on the Titan submersible incident. And one of the things that came up was um, a lady, can't remember her name, but sounded like possibly a Mexican lady, but but not an American, and she was absolutely obsessed with going to see the Titanic, and she'd actually signed up to I think 3 expeditions with the Titan, and they'd been cancelled, 3, and then I think it was only the 4th one that got the go ahead, and you literally see her on camera crying, crying when she sees the Titanic, and she's quite a young lady, just incredibly emotional. And what that shows you, you get one guy like a billionaire who will just give some of his pocket change and do a trip like that. And you'll have another person who's mortgaged her house, didn't have children, put her entire life on hold because her dream is to see the Titanic. And I've got to say, it's not my dream. If someone offered me the chance to go, I don't know if I would go. Um, it's a graveyard. If someone could guarantee that it would be safe, I'd be somewhat interested. But for some people, it's this incredible adventure, right? And that's why I say, just in terms of that, I don't think you should make a rule to say nobody should go to the Titanic because it's a graveyard. For some people, it has meaning. For some people, it has significance. And we tend to be very poor at putting ourselves aside and saying someone else might have a very valid meaning framework that for them makes sense. And in the same way, you may have a meaning of framework and fabric that to somebody else doesn't make any sense. But the thing is, they're not you, they didn't live your life. And no one can say that someone else's meaning fabric is meaningless. If it has meaning for you, it has meaning. Does that make sense? So the same applies to Van Gogh. I think people transfer their meaning fabric onto him, and mostly in a way that's got nothing to do with who he really is. And I do think that is something worth being able to communicate, because if people don't understand what is meaningful to you, then you are going to struggle in the world. If people just don't understand what, and in a way, I have that problem. I have that problem myself. The people around me don't understand. I'm talking about the people that I encounter around me typically. They don't understand the true crime conversation. They just, yeah, they don't really understand. And even people in true crime, some of them, when I meet them in person, seem to not understand what I'm trying to do. Like, the idea is not to gratuitously deal with death and tragedy. The idea is to actually see what ripped the fabric of society and tell the truth about it for the first time, for God's sake, right? Because so many people are opportunistically lying about it, or opportunistically giving it the surface treatment. And the Titanic's a really good example of that. The lesson we were supposed to learn from the Titanic is the horror that can come out of hubris. It's the same thing with the Everest disaster. And then you have all these people attracted to Titanic for the same reasons that Titanic came to be in the first place. I mean, the ship, not the shipwreck. The ship came about because of feelings of hubris. Now, people who want to go and see the ship at the bottom of the sea, it's for the same reason, hubris. I want to be able to tell everyone I went to see the Titanic. Maybe you need to see the real thing, which is that the problem in this story was hubris. Um, you know, I don't know if you're following what I'm trying to say. And that's the part that I'm interested in exposing, is to say, can you see the reality here? Because people aren't seeing the reality here. Can you see the reality in your own life? Can you see the thing that you're going after, and does it make sense? Right? Anyway, sorry about that little diversion. So he says, but I mean, think about the Borinage as a proxy for the Titanic. It's a graveyard. It's a grim subterranean graveyard, basically. And one can say, why was Van Gogh? Why did he love a place like that? What does that also tell us about him? It says, as a matter of fact, it was in the Borinage that I first started to work from nature, but of course, I destroyed it all a long time ago. But it stirs my heart that these spots are going to be painted at last. You will see how easily ideas will come to you. I'm writing you in a great hurry, but I wanted to answer your letter at once. Just to come back to this for a moment, you can imagine an artist like Van Gogh, who's interested in the human condition, who's interested in like a classical humanity in something that he sees right in front of him, right? And one way that I can explain that by not explaining that, interestingly, when they searched for the Titanic, the guy was saying how we found it wasn't by looking for the Titanic, but instead by looking for a debris field. He said the way we found Titanic was by not looking for it, but looking for a debris field. One's got to look at this idea of Van Gogh in a situation like that being very awakened and touched by the raw human condition of these miners, and you know, the human condition revealed in a very raw sense right over there. People sweating, people taking their shirts off, it's so hot, people literally wounded, people broken by their labor, people trying to warm themselves, people coming out after a hard day's work with literally dirt on their faces, dirty hands, dirty feet, coming up to the light, right? All of these very poetic, classical references to labor, if I can put it that way, right? And it's that same attitude that he brings to all and the rest of his art. He's trying to show the classic human condition in a farmer, in this whole idea of harvesting. You reap what you sow. It's not just, hi guys, here's a nice beautiful field in the south of France, look how nice the summer sun looks on it. It's this idea of harvest, but within a now a lot more colorful setting, right? It's the same idea. He's trying to intuit, is trying to what is happening is what he sees resonates with him, and he's trying to make that resonate on the canvas so that it reaches you. That's what he's trying to do. And then the question is, does he convey that? Does he convey this deep intention? Does he convey it to the people around him? And the answer is that's an extremely difficult thing, a very cerebral thing to convey to a postman or a barman or a waiter or a street sweeper. It's a very, even if you could convey it, they'd be like, okay, enjoy, good luck with that. Most people wouldn't really appreciate it, but you are addressing the human condition. By the same token, his letters do tell us the extraordinary thing that he was trying to do through his art. What I'm trying to say is, in your life, I don't know whether you are living certain meaningful constructs, but possibly you are, and possibly the thing that you're doing wrong or the thing that you need to do is try and communicate better, not with your postman, not that there are any really that these days, or the dog walker you encounter, but someone close to you matters to you. Make an effort to make clear what your meaningful thing is. And unfortunately, the reality is if you do that, more than likely that person will disagree with you and say, I don't believe in that. I don't agree with that. And the thing that is really necessary is number one, to say that, to communicate that effectively. And the other person to say, I realize and understand that you, not me, that this is your life and this is your meaning construct in your life. And fair enough, that's what it is. And often in a real time context, it might seem laughable, it might seem eccentric, it might seem strange, but in a more global sense, like if you had imagined you are no longer alive, that other person you're talking to is no longer alive, there may be a different sense that, wow, you were doing something that was actually quite interesting regarding humanity itself. You were actually addressing something beyond um, your own sort of survival and beyond 9 to 5. You're actually thinking in a very global cultural sense. This is what's happening to our species. This is what's happening to humanity. Maybe these are thoughts worth thinking about. And maybe the reason we are in this predicament is because there are not enough people with a meaning construct like this thinking in these global terms. Maybe they don't have time. Maybe they don't have the energy. Maybe they don't have the insight. But maybe we need more people thinking like that. But maybe the failure from those people is that um, they aren't able to influence the people right next to them. But good luck doing that at the same time. Chelsea says, I have a postman. He steps in my flower garden when he brings my mail, so I'm not very happy with him. I could imagine. Maybe you should put up a sign. Although I've got someone who reads my water meter, and every time he's done that, he's stepped on like a rose thing. And I've told him in person, please don't step on it. And now, of course, it's dead. So I was thinking, with regard to things like wars and rebellions, that they are natural things that happen because people eventually, it's unvoiced, but people kind of realize, I'm not very satisfied with what's going on. And then when enough people feel that way, things change. And so you can have a very cerebral approach where you say, this is what needs to happen to our community or to our culture. And then you can have the barbarian way where people decide, I can't be treated this way, and then light fires and do all that kind of thing. I don't know if our world can afford the barbarian approach. There are 8 billion people in the world, I don't know whether we can only change things by resorting to barbarism. But by the same token, we seem to be very, very bad at thinking in a cerebral way with any kind of solidarity. We seem very, very bad at the real world. And that is something that really troubles me. And that is what a lot of my work addresses, is the denial of death, the denial of reality. And that is going to be our cross to bear. Chelsea says, I'm making a sign tomorrow. Yeah. And so that is, in a way, a challenge that we have as an individuals and as a society. Can you communicate the priorities that aren't just your own priorities, but human priorities in a way that's not alienating or isolating? Can you share something meaningful in a way that's effective communication? If you think about just how effective manipulative communication can be, think about this Titan submarine and let's call it one another astronauts and mission specialists. Why can't poets and artists like Van Gogh communicate in the same meaningful way? And I think the answer is you can. You just got to try harder. Guys, Mel's back, so we can continue now. Okay, let's go on. Enclosed is a pretty bad sketch of the Starry Night. All these pictures are square-sized study canvases. If you had stayed here until now, you'd have taken along other studies. For I tell you, the scenery has been extraordinarily beautiful. Oh, excuse me. The sun, I can see the sun coming up through the blinds on the other side. There's a sparrow outside my my home that's trying to build a nest under a light. It's the light sort of got a wooden cage around it, or a wooden frame around it, and now it's trying to build a nest, but the twigs it puts there just aren't long enough to create a kind of crow's nest. And so every morning there's like a pile of twigs on the ground, and I sort of just feel like I wish I could just tell the sparrow, just make it like an inch longer and you'll be fine, because you spend so much time trying to build this nest. So now what I've done is I've put some string there that'll hopefully start catching the twigs that fall down. If he continues to build it, I won't be surprised if the nest starts to touch the bulb, and then it's going to short the whole light. On the other hand, me actually trying to tie some strands there to help the sparrow may have frightened it away from continuing with its enterprise. I see a little bit of a analogy there, and trying to like fix the world. You try and you recognize what's wrong, and you try and sort it out, and you somehow just end up making it worse. So it's quite sad. How many nests do I have now? Well, basically 3. So it's a swallow's nest that I think is abandoned because it's winter. There's one weaver's nest, and then there's the sparrow that's on the never-ending journey to try and make his nest, which I think, as I say, has been abandoned now. The moment I try to help him, I think he's now abandoned it. More than once I've done, you kind of had the same also with Stockton Rush. The moment you try to help him get on track with his submersible, then he didn't want to do that, and then the guy either got fired or left. It's quite weird. It's quite weird what reality does. Anyway, more than once I've done a size 30 canvas in one day, but then I did not stir from the spot from morning till sunset, except to eat a morsel. I must say I've worked like that. Through my 40s, for almost a decade, I worked a lot like that, working all day, just writing, researching. My brother wrote me that he saw you in passing. Well, I hope we'll meet again next year. Above all, don't forget to let me have your address when you move, or to give me your exact permanent address in La Louvière, if my memory serves me well. For it will be excellent to work continuously in the mining district, and also to see something quite different come to the country of the oleanders and the sulfur sun. Is your sister going to do the miners too? Now, that's not just an idle reference. His sister would ultimately buy the only Van Gogh that we know of that was bought during his lifetime. So he obviously is. He did manage to make some kind of breakthrough with this guy and with his sister. And you can imagine writing a letter like this saying, I love the dismal Borinage. You can imagine that is going to reach into the core of this poet, who's going to think this is a special person. This is someone unusual. This is someone who doesn't see the world the way most of the world sees itself. And it's important. It's important to have someone like that in the world. Surely there's work enough for two. I think it is a very pleasant thing for you to be both painting in the same house. Well, I must go out to work in the vineyard near Montmayor. That's actually a also an incredible thing that we're reading there, because I have cycled from Arles to Montmayor. I sort of stopped over there, like locked my bicycle on the outside of the abbey, then ran around, took some photos, got back onto my bicycle, and then cycled up those horribly steep mountains. But the worst part was the mistral that just blew from straight ahead. It made a steep incline almost unrideable because you're just virtually standing still. Eventually, I had to get off my bicycle and push it against this headwind. But that is the area. And then when I came back from the asylum of Saint Remy, I came back on a different road, and just on the outskirts of Arles, I found the sign to where he painted the Red Vineyard, and I sort of did a quick bicycle ride down there. And so that is exactly, he's talking about this vineyard near Montmayor, and it's autumn. And so one almost has the sense that he writes this letter and then he goes out to paint a vineyard. That might be the painting that his sister eventually buys. Maybe his sister reads this letter. Maybe this letter leads Eugene to talk to his sister. And when she sees the painting, it has this incredible meaning to her. Does that make sense? And so, out of this seemingly random letter, so much rests on it. If he'd either not written the letter, or if he'd not invested so much of himself into the letter, um, maybe he wouldn't even have sold that painting. Maybe it wouldn't have reached this person, and who knows, maybe even his whole legacy. Because it takes one person to buy a painting, and once it's like the rocket taking off. It burns all of its energy, or so much of its energy, in the first few moments. As soon as an artist has sold one artwork, that's kind of like the hardest obstacle to overcome. And he overcomes it, but one wonders to what extent this letter played a role in that. He says, it is all purple and yellow green under a blue sky, a beautiful color motif, a hearty handshake and good courage, and a lot of success with your work. Sincerely, Vincent. Excuse my great hurry. I haven't even time to read this letter over. So you can see this letter became historic. It was published by Dr. J.B. de la Fayel in the Chronique van Kunst en Cultuur, the Chronicle of Art and Culture. Well, there it is, March 1954. This would end up becoming a very historic letter. 3rd of October. I'd actually like to know when he painted the Red Vineyard. Let's see if we can find out. Like, I don't know if we've got the exact date. I mean, I'm sure it's October 1888, but what day in October? Does he tell us? November 1888. But what day? So the Red Vineyard was purchased by Miss Anna Boch, sister of Eugene Boch, for 350 to 400 francs. And this idea that it was bought has even been challenged. Is it true? In a book, Van Gogh, Myth and Reality. Interesting. So this is where it was exhibited. Anyway, it's quite interesting. Let's go back to the letter. Okay, I'm gonna just go and go for a little 2-minute break, and then I'll be back, and then we'll deal with this letter from the 3rd of October. You guys can just have a look at it so long. So, why do you say this has been my first art history class? Not quite sure if I understand. Chelsea says we had a power outage here for 2 hours. Wow, how come? Is it weather related or is it just? Okay, so before I continue, I did mention it in the previous live, and I must say this before you guys get too excited. Uh, some of you guys gave like more than one gave super chats of $23 or whatever. So I'm not requesting or demanding any super chats in this live, but just a reminder that because I got extra in the previous one that sort of covers this one, right? But the thing that I think we need to agree on is a minimum wage, if that's the word, of say about $13 per live. So if you can try and from 64 onwards, if you can try and each of you can give $3 or whatever and get to about $13, then I'm happy to do it. It's just it's a big chunks of my time, 3 hours or whatever, 2-3 hours. I'd like to get like about $100 per month out of the Team Peachtree channel. Otherwise, it's a lot of time. Although I enjoy it, it's still work. It ends up being a lot of time. So that's like the that's not the thanks, Chelsea, but so the idea is each episode, it's almost like a pay-per-view, basically we need to get you about $13, right? I appreciate that, although we didn't really need it for this one because it was covered in the previous one. But let's try and just bear that in mind. I hate to ask, but I'm going to ask if if it's necessary. So I hope that doesn't turn anyone off, but there are very few of you here, and it certainly doesn't make that in terms of just like the advertising revenue. So that's unfortunately what I've got to do. Snow Lion says, this series helps me tremendously. That's cool. Cool. Okay, so shall we continue? So this is a letter from Vincent to Theo from all 3rd of October. Thanks a lot. Yeah, PayPal's okay as well. This is quite a good picture. Don't you agree? This is really quite a nice, if you actually think about it, that's the green vineyard, isn't that almost, especially if you look at this line of trees here, and I saw that line of trees. Look how similar this part is and the foreground, and bear in mind that house and that house to this one. Definitely is a picture that I wouldn't mind having in my own home. But what I want you to look at is this tree line, and then these two little houses here, and then look at the vegetation here, and now look at this. You've also got the tree line, and there are two houses over there, and you've got that sort of tangle of vegetation. I don't know if I can see anyone with there's someone with an umbrella as well. So yeah, you can see how the green vineyard predates the red vineyard, right? And so it does feel like when Van Gogh wrote that letter to Eugene Boch, it's the previous letter, he did go to the setting for the red vineyard, but he ended up painting the green vineyard. But it was just a matter of time before the green vineyard became the red vineyard, right? Deborah, thank you. Thank you so much. Cool. Okay, let's continue. Isn't that like interesting that, I mean, did you guys know there was the green vineyard? I didn't really know that. And as I said, I'm pretty sure, do you guys agree that this is likely the same setting, slightly different perspective, is further away from this tree line, but it's a very similar perspective. It's a very similar setting. The green vineyard to the red vineyard. And like I said, I've been there. There really is this line of trees. It really does stand out, this line of trees going down the one side. Of course, when I was there, it was spring, so there was no vineyard whatsoever. There was just arable land. It was actually brown because nothing had been planted. But I saw that. In fact, I rode my bicycle down this corridor. So there's the green vineyard up close. Sorry, the the red vineyard up close. Okay. Right. So it says enclosed a very, very remarkable letter from Gauguin. Do put it on one side as a thing of extraordinary importance. So he's gotten a letter from Gauguin, which we haven't seen, and and he's sent it with his letter to Theo, right? He says, I mean his description of himself, which moves me to the depths of my soul. I got it along with a letter from Bernard, which Gauguin probably read and perhaps approved of, in which Bernard says once more that he wants to come here and proposes to me on behalf of Laval, Monet, and and another novice and himself to make an exchange with the four of them. Well, can you imagine if Monet had gone to all? How could history have turned out differently? Can you imagine if there's like a art multiverse and Monet had, instead of Gauguin, Monet had come to all? How could things have turned out differently? He also says that Laval will come too and that the other two want to come. I should not ask anything better, but when it is a question of several painters living a community life, I stipulate at the outset that there must be an abbot to keep order, and that would naturally be Gauguin. Wow. So he thinks of Gauguin as an abbot that keeps the order. That is why I would like Gauguin to be here first. You can see he likes Gauguin. He really respects him. He kind of sees Gauguin as the ringleader, as the big kahuna, right? He says, besides, Bernard and Laval will only come in February. Bernard has to see his military board of appeal in Paris. As for me, I want two things. I want to earn back the money, which I have already spent, so as to give it to you. And I want Gauguin to have peace and quiet in which to produce and to be able to breathe freely as an artist. So I don't know, I can't help laughing at that. Vincent van Gogh is saying that I want Gauguin to have peace and quiet so that he can produce. Do you think that is what happens? Do you think Gauguin arrives at the Yellow House and Vincent sort of lets him have peace and quiet, and Gauguin just quietly scratches on a canvas, and then that is their experience together? Because it's actually the opposite. They have this raucous, rowdy, rambunctious. They're like two roustabouts who go to the brothels and they get drunk, and it ends up with the guy losing his ear and nearly bleeding to death in the bed, and then buzzing off. Right? It's the opposite of this quiet little colony situation. It's totally the opposite of it. And Gauguin himself would say, geez, I wish this guy would just shut up. It's like he's chewing off my ear, right? I wish this guy would just stop talking to me. And even Van Gogh would say, we have these electric conversations and this and that and the next thing, right? And I don't know if I would call them electric conversations. They were really arguments. It was really two artists shouting at each other. And you can also imagine that's when things were actually going quite well. So the two would be in the same house trying to work together, and the one who would be like, "What are you doing? What is this bullshit?" Right? And that's when they're sober. When they're drunk, you can imagine these rowdy, spitting, savage encounters between these two artists, and eventually they both can't really stand each other. Especially Gauguin can't stand Van Gogh. He's like, you are an idiot. You can't paint. You've got this pathetic style. You do it all in a couple of hours. You've got no idea what you're doing. You're dirty. You just stop wasting. I need to get the hell out of here. That's how he sort of comes out of that. And within that context, the this very naive Van Gogh, I want Gauguin to have peace and quiet so that he can make art. I'm sorry, I can't help laughing. It says, if I can get back the money already spent, which you have been lending me for several years, we shall enlarge our enterprise. So even Van Gogh is quite thinking quite globally here. He's thinking, you know what? I don't want to only give you back the money that you've loaned to me or you've provided me. Over the past, for the house, I want to also even pay you back the money that you've lent me over the past several years. And the fact that he says it there, you've been lending it to me, it kind of does seem like that was the arrangement, that it's like a loan. Unless that's just taking that word out of context. Because my impression was that he his inheritance was given, Vincent van Gogh's inheritance was given to Theo. And so Theo then gave it as a kind of an allowance to Vincent. Technically, it was Vincent's money anyway. That's the way I've understood it, but it never really comes up. Then he says, we want to try and find a studio for a renaissance and not for a decadence. So he's saying we don't want to live decadently. We don't want to go and sleep with women and have muses and get drunk. Really? I'm pretty sure that we can count on Gauguin staying with us always, and that neither side will lose. Only by associating thus, each of us will be more himself, and union is strength. Now, I think in the same way that Van Gogh is fond of Méliès, the soldier who the woman liked very much, I think that's part of why he likes Gauguin, because Gauguin has the same effect on women. I don't know if women like him as much as he gets his way with women because he's such a forceful character. Um, but I think Vincent van Gogh sort of feels like if I'm um, kind of kowtowing with Gauguin, if I'm sort of his wingman, then I'm going to enjoy the spoils of that whole process, right? That seems to be how he thinks about it. Um, he says, by the way, of course, I shall not give anything to Gauguin in exchange for his portrait because I think that is sure to be too good. But I shall ask him to hand it over to us for his first month or as a payment for his fare. By the way, before I forget, our thoughts go out to Yvonne Phillips. Yvonne's not here. Yvonne, we haven't actually seen her in a while, but I don't know if you remember, Yvonne was one of the regulars in this class. That's the word. But Yvonne, we often saw her here, and I always enjoyed her being here. Yvonne's dealing with some sobering health issues, and so I just want to express um, our support and our love to you. I don't know if you're listening, but if you are, we haven't forgotten about you, and we are wishing you all the strength in the world. So um, I'll although I've been in a little bit of contact with Yvonne, I'll let you guys know how she's doing. If she wants me to, I'll let you guys know. Okay, let's go back to the letter. Um, as you can see that if I'd not written to them rather strongly, this portrait would not exist, and now Bernard has done one too. Say that I was angry, say that I was unjust, but anyway, Gauguin has given birth to a picture and Bernard too. Oh, my study of vineyards, I've worked like a slave over it, but I've got it again on a square size study. Can you see that he's becoming a really good artist? You know, if we look at some of the other pictures that he did, the garden and this and that, this is a beautiful painting. I wouldn't mind a painting like this in my home. And so in the in August 1888, in the autumn of 1888, Van Gogh is really coming into his own. Is becoming, look how idiosyncratic. You can just you feel Van Gogh in this painting. It's got that thick impasto. It's got that lively realism that we know that is so recognizably Van Gogh, right? Then he says, I haven't any more canvas left. That's how hard he's working. Do you realize that if we get Gauguin, we are at the beginning of a very great thing? which will open a new era for us. So this is how Van Gogh is starting to entertain a fairy tale. He's starting to go from being happy and being in a good place to, in a way, going off the deep end. He's starting to daydream and to kind of have a fairy tale, right? Well, Snow Lion says, this is the same picture we had in our home when I was small. It was a cheap print. Are you sure? Are you sure it wasn't the real Van Gogh? But so it obviously has incredible significance for you. You know, it's like part of the fabric of your childhood, right? It's quite incredible that. Thanks for sharing. When I left you at the station to go south, very miserable, almost an invalid and almost a drunkard, I still felt vaguely that we had put our very heart into our discussions with so many interesting people and artists that winter, but I hadn't the courage to hope. So he's really saying right here, this is quite a seminal moment. He's saying here at on the 3rd of October, or is it the 2nd? 3rd of October, he's saying he's thinking back to when his journey started. That means he's feeling the hinge of time. You know, he says, when I left you at that station in Paris, remember how miserable I was. Remember I was basically a drunk. We'd invested so much of our heart into things. And you know what, in a way, I'd actually lost courage. I'd lost hope in starting this colony. But now he's saying, is founded again. Now he's saying the fairy tale's back. There he says, hope. After continued efforts on your part and mine, now at last something is beginning to show on the horizon. Hope. He's starting to believe in a fairy tale again. And the fairy tale is an artist colony in the south, right? Let me just pause for a moment and just belabor the point. What Van Gogh wants isn't just a yellow house and he's going to stay in it and Gauguin's going to visit him and that's all that he wants. What Van Gogh wants is that's the beginning of this long story, that this long um, process, this long period where it's going to be a colony and he's going to be part of a group and they're going to become someone and he's also going to become someone, and that is kind of how he imagines it. And literally what's going to happen is he's going to have maybe 2 months of that daydream and then it's going to be gone. It's going to be gone forever. So he's going to have 2 months where an artist does come and they do have a little bit of a period where they produce things, and then it's going to end. It's going to end in a disastrous way. It's not just that he loses his ear and his friend leaves him. It's the catastrophic end to kind of a fantasy. It's a it couldn't have ended worse than the way that it ends. Not like Gauguin arrives and goes, yeah, you know, this is you're a jerk. I'm leaving. You know, that would already be a disaster. It's a absolute catastrophe in the way that Gauguin basically gets the hell out of there under the circumstances of kind of a police investigation. The police literally come to the yellow house, find this guy lying in a bed. The bed is soaked in blood, is lost his ear, is almost dead, and the people are like, also get this guy out of here. It couldn't you couldn't have a more tragic and terrible ending to this fairy tale than that, other than if Van Gogh had bled to death, if he had died, if Gauguin had murdered him and then Van Gogh had died and Gauguin had gone to jail for the rest of his life, that would have been a worse situation than the one. The one that happened was almost the worst possible result. Um, anyway, yeah, it's kind of like a co-op. It's kind of like that. Right. So He says, it does not matter if you stay with the Goupils or not, you have committed yourself to Gauguin, body and soul. So you will be one of the first or the first dealer apostle. I can see my own painting coming to life, and likewise a work among the artists. For if you try to get money for us, I shall urge every man who comes within my reach to produce, and I will set them an example myself. That's the other thing that's going on, is when Gauguin arrives, not just that Van Gogh has got to um, not stand up for himself, but prove himself. It's also that he's kind of doing it on behalf of his brother as well, to show um, we are. I'm going to set an example to you because you are in a relationship with my brother as it is. And if we stick to it, all this will help to make something more lasting than ourselves. I have to answer Gauguin and Bernard this afternoon, and I'm going to say to them that in any case, we shall begin by feeling wholly united, and that I, for one, am confident that this union will be our strength against the inevitable deficiencies of money and health. Now, I can't help thinking in this moment, Van Gogh is a little bit like the character that I don't know if have you guys watched the movie Adaptation? Now, if you've watched the movie Adaptation, you know about what I'm talking about, where the Kaufman character goes into a diner and is quite lonely and is I guess single, and the waitress is a pretty lady, and um, she's being friendly to him, and because he's kind of desperate, and because he's kind of um, yeah, desperate and lonely, he misinterprets her friendliness as flirtation. And so she tells him the story, and he thinks, wow, I like you, and you obviously like me. And then he says something like, do you want to? And then she stops, and she's been smiling the whole time, and her smile drops, and she realizes, oh, you hitting on me. Like, I thought this was just a friendly conversation, and you totally misinterpreted it. And then like a smile drops, and it's so funny. It's really, really funny. And you kind of get the sense that Van Gogh is kind of doing the same with Gauguin. Van Gogh is so desperate to have a friend that he's now going to totally overwhelm this person with his excitement, right? So anyway, he says, um, okay, so do go and see Thomas in spite of everything. Because before Gauguin comes, I want to buy some more things. The following: dressing table and chest of drawers. Wow. He's not shy about asking for more money now, right? 4 sheets, 3 drawing books, kitchen range, paints and canvases, frames and stretchers. So you can see again where his priority is: 250 francs for paints, canvases, frames, and stretchers, and then what's that? 150 for the rest, for the other things. There. So what's it in total? 250, 300. Yeah. There, it's a lot, and nothing of it is absolutely essential. We can do without any item, but all the same, the broader and more lasting character which I want this business to have demands it. So can you see how he says none of it's essential, but I'm demanding it? For instance, the 4 extra sheets, I have 4 already. We shall even be able to put Bernard up for nothing if we put a straw pallet or mattress on the floor, either for me or for him, just as we like. The kitchen range will warm the studio for us at the same time. But you will say, and these paints? Well, yes, I'm ashamed of it, but I'm vain enough to want to make a certain impression on Gauguin with my work. So can you see, now that we're in October, and remember I said October is the busiest month where Van Gogh writes the most letters. Well, it's because he's getting the most excited. He's getting really caught up in what's going on, and he wants to do some PR. He wants to market himself. He wants to promote his work, and he wants to create an impression of himself with Gauguin, right? And he says, you know, I am ashamed of it, but I am feeling like my ego's on the line. I have to prove myself. So he says, I cannot help wanting to do as much work as possible alone before he comes. His coming will alter my manner of painting, and I shall gain by it, I believe. But all the same, I'm rather keen on my decorations. So can you see what he's almost saying is he's saying, I am really finding my feet. I'm really finding my voice as an artist. And I really want to keep doing that. I'm a little bit afraid when he comes, he's going to alter my manner of painting. In other words, he's going to come there and tell me what to do. And he's absolutely right. That is exactly what's going to happen. And you kind of get the sense that Van Gogh realizes is in a weak place. He hasn't sold his art, but he wants to consolidate the direction that he's taking by producing good art and enough good art to say, can you see what I'm trying to do? It's quite interesting, right? He's trying to say, I'm trying to preserve my style. I know this dude has got a forceful attitude, and I need to be able, I need my art to be able to stand up to that. And isn't that already an admission of what is going to happen at the end of the story? Isn't it what's going to happen is that it's not going to be able to stand up to the great Gauguin? That despite Van Gogh's, never a good deed goes unpunished, despite Vincent's um, good deed, he's going to be punished for it, right? Over and above all this, we have to add Gauguin's fare. But if Thomas isn't willing to be free-handed, Gauguin's fare comes before everything else, to the detriment of your pocket and mine, before everything else. All the expenses I have mentioned are only meant to make a good impression on him at the moment he arrives. I would like him to feel it all harmonious, and I wish that we could have managed, you by your money and I with a general effect and the arrangement of things, to have the studio complete and a setting worthy of the artist Gauguin, who is to be, etc. The other thing that's going on in terms of fairy tale is, to Vincent, Gauguin is kind of like a hero. Gauguin is like the artist that, in a way, he wants to be. Someone respected, someone who sells his art, someone who kind of effortlessly executes, but in terms of art, right? And when he actually lives with Gauguin, it's not that he's going to just meet Gauguin on the street and they're going to have beers together. They're going to live together. He's going to realize that Gauguin's a three-dimensional character, and he's also going to realize the parts of that character that he really doesn't like. And there are going to be things where he's going to feel like it's so exciting having an artist right next door. Gauguin, come check out what I've just done here. And Gauguin's going to be like, that, you call that art, right? So it's going to be a very, um, it's going to be like an awakening, but in some ways a very unpleasant awakening. It would be a good stroke, like the old days when Corot, finding Daumier on the rocks, made life so secure for him that he found everything easy, but it will do very well even as things are. The essential thing is the fare, and even my paints can wait, though I venture to think that I shall someday earn more with them than they cost. I shouldn't make light of Gauguin's giving you the monopoly of his work, and straight off his prices will go up, nothing below 500 francs. So I think Van Gogh may have sold the Red Vineyard for 350 francs, which isn't bad. He's saying Gauguin's art shouldn't sell for less than 500. He only needs confidence, and now he will have it. I feel that we are working in a great and good enterprise, which has nothing to do with the old kind of commerce. As for the colors, it is almost certain that with Gauguin here, we shall braid them ourselves. I've painted the vines again entirely with Tanguy's paints, and they are satisfactory. The coarser grain is in no way troublesome. If we go on attacking things in the right way, I mean from the human, not the material side, it seems to me altogether out of the question. Sorry about that. It's um, that the material difficulties may smooth themselves out, because one grows in the storm. I'm going on framing studies because it all goes to make part of the furnishing and gives character to the place. So that is also the way that um, Van Gogh thinks about struggle and difficulty and adversity, right? People don't, often if you are in a difficult place, then you feel depressed or you despair. Van Gogh thinks about it like this: one grows in the storm. Of course, he's not in a storm at the moment. It's easy to be quite cerebral about it when you're not in it. It's less easy when you're in it to be cerebral about it. Certainly, that's cerebral. He says, I'm going on framing studies because it all goes to make part of the furnishing and gives character to the place. Um, I agree with you in part. There's a lot of Gauguin's art I don't like a lot, but some of it I get what he's conveying. I get that um, what's the word? Tropical abundance, that sense of something being ripe, that sort of fruity. Just trying to think of the right word for it. It's if it's almost it's almost when there's a lot in flowers or a garden, um, and it's sort of very it's not abundant. I can't quite think of the word. um, I don't know if you know what I mean. He seems to be talking about the Gauguin's art seems to be talking about the opposite of something that's a desert or barren, right? I can't think of the word. It's not ripe. Yeah, island art. Um, it's tropical abundance, but there's another word for it. Don't know why I'm so struggling. Yeah, so that's the word, fertile. It speaks about fertility, this idea of fertility, but a kind of primitive fertility, um, right? The potency, the generative capacity that you have in nature, and in a kind of simplicity, right? Um, so in terms of that fertility, there's a different interpretation of that Van Gogh gives it. Van Gogh kind of sees the landscape in front of him, the wheat fields, the cypresses, as electrified, as vibrating, right? And so through that texture, he sort of conveys that. And to some extent, to the contrast, Gauguin does the same thing, but in a totally different way. He paints subjects and so people and plants in a fertile setting, and through that um, very symbolic juxtaposing of man in a sort of garden setting like that, a tropical island setting, you get almost like this hedonistic sense um, of of abundance, if that's the word. So it's a similar idea that there's a lot of energy in the world, but they apply it slightly differently. So I must say I like both of their art. I don't like Gauguin as a person very much, but I like some of his art more than Van Gogh's, and there's some of Gauguin's work that I really don't like at all. Like I think it's the one's called the Yellow Christ. Whereas I quite like Van Gogh the person, and his art. Some of his art is really brilliant and very brilliantly accessible. So that's my take on it. Okay, if Gauguin gives his work to you officially because you're with the Goupils and privately as your friend and under an obligation to you, then in return, Gauguin can consider himself head of the studio and control the money as he thinks fit. Now, again, consider the potential arrogance of this. Van Gogh he hasn't sold anything, isn't making any money, has actually zero agency, and is basically saying to his brother, let's think of Gauguin as the head of the studio, and let's have this arrangement in terms of your work and the private arrangement that's going on. He shouldn't really have any say, but anyway, there it goes. So he says, if it can be done, help Bernard, Laval, and others by exchanging studies or pictures. I shall abide by the same conditions, giving my studies for 100 francs and my share of the canvas and paints. But the more Gauguin realizes that when he joins us, he will have the standing of head of the studio, the sooner he will get better and more eager he will be to work. So, can you see he's already thinking of flattering Gauguin, buttering him up, um, complimenting him, and he's totally wrong in all of this. He's got all of these ideas. Gauguin is going to be there for 2 months, then I'm out of here, and I'm not even going to look back, right? No, thank you, like a big no, thank you, basically. Now the more complete the studio and the more solidly established it is for the use of those who are passing through, the more inspiration he will have and ambition to make it a living force. So that is what they're trying to do. By the way, can you see how so much of this letter is written with Gauguin at the center of it? And that's kind of the question is that going to be what October is going to be all about? Is it's all about thinking about Gauguin? What does Gauguin want? How can we please Gauguin? Basically investing himself in Gauguin, right? They're talking of nothing else at the moment at Pont-Aven, which means that Paris will be talking too. And once again, the more solidly established it is, so much the better will the general impression be, and the greater the chance that it will catch on. What will be will be. Only I say now to prevent future discussions, if it catches on so that Laval and Bernard will really come, Gauguin and not I will be the head of the studio. As for the internal arrangements, I think that we shall agree pretty well. That is not going to be the case. I hope I shall get your next letter by Wednesday. Bernard's letter is once more full of his conviction that Gauguin is a very great master and a man absolutely superior in character and intellect. A good handshake and goodbye for now. Ever yours, Vincent. The vineyards that I've just painted is green, purple, and yellow with violet bunches and branches in black and orange. On the horizon are some blue-grey willows and the wine press a long, long way off with a red roof and the lilac silhouette of the distant town. The distant town he's talking about is all. In the vineyard, there are little figures of women with red parasols and other little figures of men working at gathering sorry, gathering grapes with their cart. It's quite a long letter, this. Over it is a blue sky, and the foreground is of grey sand. This is a pendant, so I guess like an accessory to the garden with the clipped bush and the oleanders. I think you will prefer these 10 canvases to the batch I sent last, and I venture to hope to double the number in the autumn. Day after day, it grows richer and richer. And when the leaves start to fall, I do not know if this happens in the beginning of November, the way it does with us, when all the foliage is yellow. It'll be amazing against the blue. Funny enough, I'm thinking the exact same thought as I'm thinking of returning to America to photograph the fall, and I just don't know exactly when it is. Should I go in September or October or November? Zaim has given us that splendor many a time already, then a short winter, and after that we shall have got to the orchards. We shall have got to the orchards in bloom again. What Gauguin says about Persian painting is true. I don't believe that it would shock anybody in the Dieu la Foy Museum. One might put it there without any difficulties. But I myself do not belong to the world of the great, not even to any world at all. And I prefer the Greeks and Japanese to the Persians and Egyptians. All the same, I do not mean to say that Gauguin is wrong in working in the Persian style, but I should have to get used to it. So he ends his letter basically saying, I'm not sure if I really like his style. It's not a really great note to end off on if you're going to have this guy whose style you don't approve of living under your roof, right? So I wonder if we can do one more letter. Well, it's also on the 3rd of October, and it's to Paul Gauguin, right? Okay. Is there, so, okay. So we're going to end off with this letter from Van Gogh to Paul Gauguin, and we'll do episode 64, commencing on the 6th of October. Okay. So this was sent from Arles, 3rd of October, 1888, sent by Gauguin to Schiffernecker on October 8th, with the observation, I'm sending you a letter from Vincent to let you know how things stand between us and with all our present plans. My dear Gauguin, this morning I received your excellent letter, which I have again sent on to my brother. Your view of Impressionism in general, of which your portrait is a symbol, is striking. No one could be more anxious than I am to see it, but I'm sure even now that this work is too important for me to take in exchange. But if you would like to keep it for us, my brother will, if you agree, buy it at the first opportunity, and I immediately asked him to do so. So let's hope it happens soon. Now, I kind of get the idea that no one has actually seen this painting. In other words, Van Gogh and his brother are agreeing to buy a painting based on his description of it. Not a good plan. For we are trying once more to make it as easy as possible for you to come here soon. So I kind of get the idea that is a kind of a scheme. I think I could be wrong. where they're saying, we'll buy this picture that we haven't actually even seen, and you can use that money to pay for your trip to All. So in a way, they are paying for his trip to All by buying that painting. If that is what ultimately happens. I must tell you that even while working, I think continually about the plan of setting up a studio in which you and I will be permanent residents, but which both of us want to turn into a shelter and refuge for friends against the times when they find that the struggle is getting too much for them. Now, you can also imagine from Gauguin's perspective, he must be thinking, these guys have got shitloads of money. If they are thinking of having like basically running an art hotel, well then Theo must be rolling in cash. And also, if Theo is going to be basically bankrolling all of these artists, he must be a really rich art dealer, right? And that's not the case. But you can imagine him thinking that. You can imagine him thinking, well, he's paying for his brother, and he's going to be paying for me, and he's going to be paying for a bunch of other artists. Wow, I want to go to this hotel. I wonder if they've got a lazy boy there and a swimming pool as well, right? That makes sense. I that makes sense. I don't know if I would do that though, but I'll bear it in mind. What does he say? The discussions ranged further and wider with Guillaume, with the Pissarros, father and son, and with Surat, um, whom I'd not met before. I visited his studio only a few hours before my departure. These discussions often dealt with something so near to my brother's heart and mine, namely, what steps to take in order to safeguard the material existence of painters, to safeguard their means of production, paints, canvases, and to safeguard their true share in the price of their pictures, in the price their pictures fetch these days, though not until long after they have left the artist's possession. When you are here, you can mull over all these discussions. Anyway, when I left Paris, I was in a sorry state, quite ill and almost an alcoholic after driving myself on, even while my strength was failing me, and then withdrawing into myself, still bereft of hope. It's a very similar paragraph to the one that he sent to his brother. Now hope is vaguely beckoning on the horizon again, that flickering hope which used sometimes to console my solitary life. I should so much like to imbue you with a large share of my faith that we shall succeed in starting something that will endure. It's also not as though Gauguin arrives in all with no idea of what Vincent's trying to do. Vincent has a plan for himself, but also for Gauguin. Gauguin is arriving in all under within the sort of construct that this is going to be a long-term relationship, a long-term contract, if you will. And how good is he at keeping the faith? That's the other thing to bear in mind. Imagine if someone invites you to their home and they say, I really like you, I really respect you, I really want you to come here, I'm going to even give you some money. And what we're going to do is we're going to, and then it's like quite a long-term thing, right? And so it's within this scenario, within this idea, that is how and why you are going to be part of it, right? And then after 2 months, you leave. It's quite a betrayal. In the Titan submersible thing, OceanGate paid for Lockridge, a Scottish dude, to come to America and get American citizenship and bring his family over and all of that kind of thing. And Lockridge obviously wanted to make it work. But you can understand Lockridge wouldn't just go home after a month or 2 months because he'd invested himself in the whole thing. The question is, was how invested was Gauguin? What kind of a deep fellow is Gauguin, right? When we have had a talk about those strange days spent in discussion in rundown studios and the cafes of the Petit Boulevard, you will understand the full scope of this idea of my brothers and mine, and yet unrealized when it comes to setting up a society. Still, you will appreciate that in order to remedy the terrible situation of the last few years, something is needed, either along the precise lines we proposed or else very much like them. That much we have taken for our unshakable foundation. So weird, these words he's using, unshakable foundation. Well, that's exactly what Gauguin is going to do when he leaves. He's going to shake the foundation of Vincent van Gogh's life. And you will agree that we have gone a good way beyond the plan we have already communicated to you. That we have gone beyond it is no more than our duty as picture dealers. For you probably know that I, too, spent several years in the trade and do not despise the profession in which I used to earn my living. Suffice it to say that I'm sure that although you have apparently isolated yourself from Paris, you haven't stopped feeling a fairly close rapport with Paris. I'm having an extraordinarily uh, I'm having an extraordinary spell of feverish activity these days. Right now, I'm tackling a landscape with a blue sky above an immense green, purple, and yellow vineyard with black and orange vines, little figures of ladies with red parasols, and little figures of grape pickers with their small cart make it even gayer. Grey sand in the foreground, and that's obviously this one. He describes this as an immense field. We can see it doesn't just end there, it keeps going. And he's trying to use these trees to describe just how large this plantation is. An immense green vineyard. I've a portrait of myself, all ash gray, the ashen color which has been obtained by mixing malachite green with orange lead. Malachite, what is that? That reminds me a little bit of the rings in the Laurie Vallow case. On pale malachite background, all in harmony with the reddish brown clothes. Not wishing to exaggerate my own personality, however, I aimed rather for the character of a bonze, a simple worshipper of the eternal Buddha. Though I've though I've taken rather a lot of trouble with it, I shall have to go over it again if I want to express the idea properly. Says a lot. I've done this. I don't think it's really good enough. It's not saying what I wanted to say. I shall have to recover even further from the stultifying effect of our so-called state of civilization if I'm going to have a better model for a better picture. One thing that gives me enormous pleasure is the letter I received yesterday from Bach. His sister is one of the Belgian Ventistas, who writes that he has settled down in the Borinage to paint miners and coal mines there. He nevertheless intends to return to the south to vary his impressions, and if he does, he's certain to come to Arles. I consider my views of art excessively ordinary compared with yours. I've always had the coarse tastes of an animal. And I think Gauguin sees himself as very sophisticated, very civilized in a certain sense. I don't know if civilized is the word, sophisticated as an artist, whereas I think he sees Van Gogh as a bit of a barbarian in a way when it comes to executing his art. I neglect everything for the external beauties of things. beauty of things which I cannot reproduce because I render it so ugly and coarse in my pictures, albeit nature seems so perfect to me. And so there you have an admission that he doesn't think he's doing a very good job, right? And I really respect that, and I really appreciate that he feels that his art is ugly in the face of nature's beauty. I really appreciate that. I feel the same thing. I sort of feel I see nature's beauty, and I also want to um, reproduce it in an artistic way, even paint it or whatever. And I just feel like, but I'm going to turn something so beautiful into something deformed and ugly and approximate, right? He says, at present, however, my bony carcass is so full of energy that it makes straight for its objective. The result is a degree of sincerity, perhaps original at times, but what I feel, but only if the subject lends itself to my crude and clumsy touch. This is one of the best letters he's written. It's really full of character. It's really authentically Van Gogh. Do you kind of get that idea? He says, I feel sure that if from now on you were to consider yourself head of the studio, which we shall try to ensure will become a refuge for many, little by little, as our unremitting labor provides us with the means of completing it, I'm sure that you would then feel more or less consoled for the present ordeals of penury and ill health. I think penury is lacking um, finances or lacking resources. What does it say? Yeah, so there it is. The state of being very poor, extreme poverty, impoverishment. Okay. Seeing that we shall probably be devoting our lives to a generation of painters that will last a long while to come. This part of the country has already seen the cult of Venus in Greece, primarily artistic, followed by the poets and the artists of the Renaissance. Where these things could flourish, Impressionism can as well. By the way, I just want to go back to where he says, I feel sure that if from now on you were to consider yourself head of the studio, I'm sure that you would feel more or less consoled for the present ordeals of impoverishment. So, can you see what's going on here? Is he is trying very hard to sell a ticket to the Yellow House, right? Can you see that Van Gogh is going to a lot of effort to flatter, to manipulate, to attract, to convince Gauguin that it's worth his while, it's worth it. It's going to be worthwhile to him to take the Van Goghs up on their offer. He's put a lot of effort into this letter, but he's also making um, substantial offers. I mean, I don't know whether Theo said, yes, it's okay, make Gauguin the head of your studio. He's already making this offer and he's not even there. He's not even in the room. Once again, you also get a sense of Van Gogh as the martyr. Van Gogh sets up this, Van Gogh, he sets up the house, he decorates it, he prepares it, and he's going to have Gauguin arrive, get the better room, get the better furnished room, and Gauguin arrives as the head of the studio. You can see how Vincent puts himself second, how he puts Gauguin first, right? And I'm saying, doesn't he do the same thing when the ear incident happens, when he's shot in the stomach? You can see to what extent he is a kind of a martyr, right? But he's a strange guy. He's a guy who can put himself second and then also feel very strongly about the things he feels strongly about. You know, he's also, as much as he's a martyr, he's has the strength of character to stand up for himself. I've made a special decoration, the Poet's Garden, for the room you will have. There is a first draft of it among the sketches in Bernard's possession. I'm not sure if I would be too keen on staying in a room with this decoration in it. The ordinary public garden contains plants and shrubs that conjure landscapes in which one can readily imagine Botticelli, Giotto, Petrarch, Dante, and Boccaccio. Now, you know what's quite interesting with this is Van Gogh seems to be thinking, I'm going to be painting fertility. I'm going to be painting natural extravagance. I'm going to be painting tropical abundance, my version of it. And I'm going to be putting that up in your room and decorating your room with my idea of it. And that's what that garden represents. Then you kind of get a sense of that. I've tried to distill in the decoration the essence of what constitutes the immutable character of this country. I don't know, in the end, I don't think it's a very nice painting. And I set out to paint that garden in such a way that one is put in mind of the old poet from these parts, or rather from Avignon, uh, Petrarch, and of the new poet from these parts, Paul Gauguin. You can see how he is still complimenting him. However clumsy this attempt may be, it may show you perhaps that I've been thinking of you with very great emotion as I prepared your studio. So now we are getting a sense of why Van Gogh is going to be propelled into the depths of despair, why things are going to fall apart, right? And can you see what the answer is to that? Let me ask you guys directly. There's one word in this highlighted text that provides the answer to our question. The question is, why does Van Gogh unravel? How does Van Gogh unravel? Right? And the answer is in that paragraph. It's one word. Do you know what word that is? Come on, students, let's hear it. Yes, emotion. Van Gogh's going to be allowing, and he is allowing his emotions to get the better of him. And you can imagine when two artists get together and one gets emotional and the other one gets emotional, you're going to have basically a clusterfuck, excuse the term. You're going to get two emotional artists that are going to create a fireworks display of blood and tears, right? That's it. Do you agree? I mean, that is the thing that's starting to happen to Van Gogh right now. He's starting to get emotional. He's going to be getting more and more emotional, and it's all sorts of emotions: excitement, anticipation, um, all the emotions that go into a fairy tale: love, hope, joy, happiness. Um, but then also the negative emotions, anger, disappointment, but like a sense of bitter despair, um, pain. Um, yeah. So what's going to happen now is emotions are going to kind of take over. It's going to be this emotional thing where another artist comes into the house that he's prepared. It's going to fill him with feelings of joy and satisfaction and validation, and all these warm and fuzzy feelings. You're going to just feel so happy and alive, and you know, it's the nicest time of my life. It's so great that this artist, this hero of mine, is going to be living with me, and my dreams are going to come true. It's this is a dream come true, and it's out of that a nightmare is going to come out. Can you feel the stars starting to align? Can you feel we starting to figure out what is going on here? Let's be of good heart about the success of our venture, and please keep thinking of this as your home, for I feel very sure that all this will last for a very long time. That's the problem. This is becoming a feeling, emotional relationship. A warm handshake, and believe me, ever yours, Vincent. Now, bear in mind, this letter does its job. It resonates so much with Gauguin that Gauguin takes the letter and he sends it to some other dude. And this letter basically is the kick in the pants that Gauguin needs. And then as if he's not said enough, he says, "I'm only afraid that you will think Brittany more beautiful indeed, that you will find nothing more beautiful here than Daumier. The figures here are often pure Daumier. It shouldn't take you long to discover that antiquity and the Renaissance lie dormant under all this modernity. Well, you are free to revive them." And of course, Gauguin ends up not liking all. He doesn't like the people, and they don't like him. Bernard tells me that he, Morel, Laval, and somebody else will be making exchanges with me. In um, in principle, I'm very much in favor of the system of exchanges between artists because I've seen the important part it played in the life of the Japanese painters. Accordingly, one of these days I shall be sending you what studies I have that are dry and that I can spare, so that you may have first pick. Again, is really, I don't want to say laying it on thick, but is making Gauguin feel very special, feel very important. And you can kind of imagine that Gauguin thinks that he can arrive in all like the conquering hero and just expect to be treated like royalty, and expect to have the red carpet rolled out, and expect that he can walk over Van Gogh and Van Gogh will say thank you. Um, He says, "But I shall make no exchanges at all with you if it means that on your side it costs you something as important as your portrait, which is sure to be too beautiful." Wow, it's really is laying it on quite thick. "Truly, I wouldn't dare, because my brother would gladly buy it um, from you for a whole month's money." And that is, those last words are what's actually motivating Gauguin. Gauguin wants to be flattered, but he also wants, in a way, an easy ticket out of the situation that he's in. He wants someone else to pay the piper. And isn't that exactly what happens? Robbie Robin, you're very late. In fact, you're late enough to have joined us right at the very end of this letter. And so that is where we're going to conclude it. 6th of October, 1888. And so these are some of the other artworks that he is going to be doing. We haven't seen this one before. Anyway, so we'll be dealing with this letter from 6th of October in Van Gogh letters number 64, right? 64. Okay. Okay, guys, that's it from me. It's 20 to 9 in the morning here in South Africa. It's the sun shining. It's blue skies. I think I'm going to take my dog for a walk somewhere not new, but not that a place I don't normally take him, or I don't often take him. Let's have a look at some of your comments. Yeah, that's true. Some people are going to be very disappointed, right? Um, yeah. Snowline says, I get the impression that Van Gogh is in awe. Yeah, he is. Robbie Robbins says, I wish I'd seen the notification, but I was asleep. Okay. Okay, guys, thanks a lot for being here. Also, thanks for the super chats. Really appreciate it. We hit our minimum wage, so I really appreciate it. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. And once again, happy July 4th, Independence Day. Like I said, I thought I would actually be in America until now. So maybe I'll experience it next year. Who knows? Anyway, I hope you guys have a wonderful time. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time. All the best. Oh, thanks a lot. Glad you enjoyed it.